Growth. And the first question is, before we start, why should we care how the economy is doing?
It affects how much money we make.
Yes. Yeah, that's definitely one part of it, Ben. Excellent. So then Christabel says the economy affects our own personal spending. Yes. Yeah, so it affects us. Like it affects us personally. If the economy is doing badly, it translates to less money that we generate, and we might lose our jobs, everything. So there's a lot of issues with how the if the economy is doing badly, we're gonna suffer. So we're gonna go through how economic growth is measured, analyze how productivity, technology, and trade relate to economic growth, summarize the impact of population growth and government policies on economic growth, analyze how saving and investment are related to economic growth, and explain how the functions of financial institutions affect households and businesses. Okay, sounds good. Thanks for letting me know, Ben. So, measuring economic growth. So, economic growth allows successive generations to have more and better goods and services than their parents had. Economic growth enables an entire society to make improvements to its quality of life. So, it's very important to improving the standard of living, how we live, if we want to live better. The economic growth shows that. And to satisfy the needs of a growing population, real GDP must grow at least as fast as the population does. This is one reason that economists prefer a measure that takes population growth into account. So, GDP per capita is used because it takes population growth into account. So, using GDP per capita, GDP has to rise more than population in order for GDP per capita to grow. So, yeah. So, GDP has to rise faster than population growth for GDP per capita to grow. So that so so yeah, GDP per capita is the best measure of standard of living. And I'll say real GDP per capita is the best measure of standard of living. And then an even better measure is if we look at median real GDP per capita is the best. So median real GDP per capita is better because median real GDP per capita adjusts for outliers, while like average real GDP per capita may be skewed by outliers. So using the median one is a lot better because it's more accurate. But average is still pretty good, but median is better. So real GDP per capita is considered the most accurate measure of a nation's standard of living. As long as real GDP is rising faster than the population, real GDP per capita will rise, and so will the standard of living. So analyze graphs. Is it possible for real GDP per capita to grow if the population remains the same? Explain your answers. So I'll show you these graphs here. So is it possible for real GDP per capita to rise when population stays constant? So Serena said yes if they're spending more money. Yes. So if they're spending more money and that leads to more real GDP, then real GDP per capita will grow. And yes, real GDP per capita can rise if population stays constant, real GDP is growing faster. Yes, Christabel, yes, perfect. So if population rising, it if population was the only thing that was rising and real GDP was constant, real GDP per capita would just decrease. So if real GDP was constant and population was rising, real GDP per capita would go down. So yeah, so real GDP has to rise faster than population for real GDP per capita to grow. And as you can see by these graphs here, real GDP has been rising faster over the 1990 to 2010 period than population over that period. And therefore that leads to real GDP per capita to grow over time. So good input, Serena Christabel on that one. So analyze information. So how is high GDP per capita linked to quality of life? So yeah, high GDP per capita usually indicates better nutrition, housing, education, job opportunities, happiness. Yes. Excellent. So capital deepening. So the video I showed in a few previous classes was focused on the issue Canada has with capital deepening. So Canada spends about half per worker on capital compared to the United States. So United States spends double Canada's on workers' capital. So that is a concern. That's one of the reasons why Canada is less productive than the United States. And like in the video, they talked about how Canada has too much of a focus on real estate as an asset and not enough of a focus on productivity. So that's the biggest issue that Canada deals with right now. And they need to be shifting their investment focus to capital investments rather than real estate to solve this productivity issue because Canada's productivity is just not growing at the rate it should be. So capital deepening occurs when businesses buy machines and equipment that leads to general greater worker productivity. Increased productivity leads to increased demand for workers, higher wages, and economic growth. So physical capital equipment used to produce goods and services improves, plus human capital workers gain skills to operate improved equipment, increased labor productivity, better trained workers use improved equipment to produce more, increased output, more productive workers lead to increased output for the company and economic growth, increased labor demand, economic growth leads employers to demand more workers, increased wages, the increased demand for more workers will increase the equilibrium wage rate. So what you're doing here with your program is part of human capital. So you're gaining human capital by being in this program and doing education. So that's really good to solve a productivity crisis. So here we're working on improving the amount of productivity that we have in this program. So this program's great for solving that issue that Canada has. And also the other side of it is capital investment in terms of factories, machinery, and all that kind of stuff. That's important as well. So human capital, education, and then physical capital, factories, machinery, etc. So even if the size of the labor force does not change, more physical capital will lead to more output. In other words, to economic growth. This process of increasing the amount of capital per worker, called capital deepening, is one of the most important sources of growth in the modern economies. So how does capital deepening benefit workers? They can make higher wages and there will be more demand for workers as well. Yes, excellent, Serena. Helps them be better trained to produce more while being safer, Christabel. Yes. So they produce more, and that leads to them having higher wages and more demand for workers because there's more productivity from workers. So you're going to get more out of them. So it's a better investment because they're more productive. And for Curtis, thanks for coming in, Curtis. I'll just put this in the chat here whenever you're ready. So it would result in improved working conditions because the machinery or equipment would be safer and more comfortable to work with. Yes. So yeah, that's a good point. Safety, a great point, Monica. Yeah, safety can be improved with better, more capital investment. So workers would be more efficient. Their machinery is more efficient. Excellent, Ben. Yes. So why does capital deepening work with human capital? So greater skill increases workers' output. Yes, excellent. So saving and investment, see how saving and investment are related. Consider an economy with no government sector and no foreign trade. In this simplified economy, consumers and business firms purchase all output. In other words, output can be used for consumption by consumers or investment by firms. Income that is not used for consumption is called savings. So in this case, Shauna's income, $25,000 is spent, $5,000 is saved. $3,000 is saved in a mutual fund, stocks and corporate bonds. Mutual fund firm makes Shauna's $3,000 available to firms. And that $3,000 that was invested in a mutual fund is used for capital investment. While the $2,000 she put into a rainy day bank account will be lent as mortgages and loans, so that $2,000 may not be invested in capital investment. If the mortgages are home mortgages to buy real estate, then that $2,000 wouldn't be put to capital investment use. So that's one of the issues our economy has, is that a lot of what any deposits that we put in the bank are used for loans and mortgages for properties, real estate assets. So that's one of the biggest issues, because the banks are very invested in real estate, and that's one of their biggest investments. So that causes some issues because they're not investing as much as they need to into capital investment. So if we put our savings more into mutual funds, exchange traded funds, stocks, and corporate bonds, compared to the deposits, that would solve a lot of the issues, because we'd be focused on capital investment instead. So that would be very important. Also, yeah, since output can only be consumed or invested, whatever is not consumed must be invested. Therefore, in the simplified economy, saving is equal to investment. Portion of technology and healthcare and railroads and banks, so those types of ones. So let's keep going with this. So saving and investment. So if total saving rises, more investment funds become available to businesses. This accumulation of savings made available for investment is called capital formation. Those firms will use most of those funds for capital investment. That is, they will expand the stock of capital in the business sector. So saving investment, if total saving rises, more investment funds become available to businesses. This accumulation of savings made available for investments called capital formation. So they'll use this for capital investment. So those ETFs that I talked about, that money will be used for capital investment. So identify cause and effect. So how is saving linked to capital formation? So saving provides money for investment in human physical capital. Yes. So saving is saving goes towards investment in human physical capital if you're directing it towards that and not real estate. Yeah. So the effects of the population, government, and trade. Now we will consider slightly more realistic economy that has population growth, a government sector, and foreign trade. First, think about the effects of population growth and capital accumulation. Population growth does not necessarily preclude economic growth. However, if the population grows while the supply of capital remains constant, the amount of capital per worker will shrink. This process, the opposite of capital deepening, leads to lower living standards. So like we talked about, if the population grows while the supply of capital remains constant, the amount of capital per worker will shrink. So that does happen. Government can affect capital formation in several ways. If the government raises tax rates to pay for additional services or to finance a war, households will have less money. People will reduce saving, thus reducing the money available to businesses for investment. In these cases, the government is taxing households in order to pay for its own consumption spending. The net effect is reduced investment. On the other hand, a different result occurs if the government invests that extra tax revenues in public goods, such as roads and telecommunications. These public goods are called infrastructure, the underlying necessities of modern life. Spending on infrastructure increases investment. Foreign trade can result in a trade deficit, a situation in which the value of goods a country imports is higher than the value of goods it exports. Running a trade deficit may not seem like a wise practice, but if the imports consist of investment goods, the practice can foster capital deepening. Of course, not all trade deficits promote capital deepening. In this regard, trade deficits are similar to government taxation. Whether they encourage capital deepening and economic growth depends on how these funds are used. If they are used for short-term consumption, the economy will not grow any faster, and it will not have any additional GDP to pay back the debts. If the funds are used for long-term investment, however, they will foster capital deepening. The resulting economic growth will bring the country prosperity in the future. So, which answer best describes the effect of higher tax rates on investment? Serena Soper taking the lead. Great work. So higher tax rates increase investment if the revenue is used to improve infrastructure. So I'll clarify this one. So higher tax rates reduce investment. That's true for personal investment. So higher tax rates reduce personal investment. That is true. But if the government invests that tax money, then government investment will increase. So everyone who answered that were correct for personal investment. Yeah. Technological progress and increased efficiency gained by producing more output without using more inputs. So measuring technological progress in most modern economies, the amount of physical and human capital changes all the time. So do the quantity and quality of labor and the technology used to produce goods and services. These interconnected variables work together to produce economic growth. Since technological progress is such an important source of economic growth, economists have looked for its causes. They have found a variety of factors that influence technological progress. So scientific research can generate new or improved production techniques, improve physical capital, and result in better goods and services. Innovation, when new products and ideas are successfully brought into the market, output goes up, boosting GDP and business profits. Yet innovation often requires costly research. Education experience, as you read earlier, firms increase their human capital by providing education on the job experience for the employees. Human capital makes workers more productive, which accelerates economic growth. So analyze charts. So why are companies willing to spend such large amounts of resources on training? So based on this chart, General Electric founded its first corporate university in 1956. Apple founded Apple University in 2008. Number of students at McDonald's Hamburger University each year is 5,000. Annual corporate spending on internal training is $60 billion. Percentage of companies with corporate universities reporting increased productivity is 55%. After-tax profits of U.S. corporations in 1990 is $225 billion. In 2012 is $4.8 trillion. So why are companies willing to spend such large amounts in resources and training? So Monica says it will lead to increased productivity, which will make the company more money. Yes. Education equals increased productivity proven. Yes, Christabel, excellence. Serena, if their workers are trained better, they'll do a better job and save the company's money in the long run. Yes. So it's a short run cost for long run gain. So it will pay off in the long run. The cost right now might be significant, but the payoff will be a lot in the long run. More knowledgeable workers can work better, faster, and with less mistakes. Excellent, Ben. And then Curtis says we'll produce more skilled employees. Excellent. And as you can see, percentage of companies with corporate universities reporting increased productivity, 55%. So that's a pretty impressive number that a lot of them have succeeded on this. So causes of technological progress, natural resource use, increased use of natural resources can create a need for new technologies. So extracting oil, for example, oil drilling technology is needed. Some very specific, very specialized technology is needed. So yeah, so that there's a need for new technology for that. So what are the main factors in technological progress? Yes, scientific research, innovation, skill, market education, experience, and natural resource use. Yes, perfect. And I'll ask the question I asked at the beginning of the lecture again. Why should we care how the economy is doing? So Monica says it affects our employment opportunities and wages. Yes. Christabel says because it directly affects our living standards, it is indicative of opportunities in Canada. Yes. Curtis says it impacts our investment returns. Yes. Then Ben says everything we do that interacts with the economy impacts us, increases/decreases taxing, education, etc. Yes, Ben, excellent. And then Serena, it affects